What is this chat?
Hello
Subscribe to
everybody, my name
QBM?
is QBM, and
Okay, well I guess that
it's
counts
been a
then.
while, but I'm back. Lots of Christmas things, finishing up finals, work, all that great stuff. But today I have for you guys a hybrid trap, build up and drop, which is going to be pretty nice. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I've already wasted your time for the past 2 months without uploading, so let's go ahead and play it.
She's my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone. She's my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone. She's my cologne and she's my cologne. She's my cologne. She's my cologne.
Okay, so that's that. Let's go ahead and get into how I did everything. So first things first, we're gonna work from the drums up here, this whole section. Then we're gonna work on the sound design and the rest of the elements. So let's start with our drums. So I used the Daily FB Chill-Fi Sounds Volume 1, which is meant for more future bass and chill, relaxed stuff. But has really nice trap drums in it. So I'm gonna leave a link to that in the description. I think it's only $2. I don't know, I've gotten a lot of use out of this pack. Got a lot of great kicks, hats, snares, all that. Some great samples. So I took a kick from that, and then I layered some snares. First off, I have this standard trap snare on the offbeat. Then I have 3 other snares, just layering to make our full-fledged hybrid trap snare. Now, what you want to note is that I put some reverb on the main, more hybrid sound one, because there tends to be a good amount of reverb on hybrid trap snares. And then for our second part of the pattern, we have our hi-hats. We have our main hi-hat right here. That's what our pattern looks like. And then we also have our offbeat hi-hats right here. And then finally for our drums, we have our 808 sub bass in here, which I believe I got from the Cymatics Savage Drums for Trap. Now it's easy to just go wild with it and make a pattern that goes crazy, and that's what I did at first, but it kind of clashes. These minor second notes here that go up a half step, they kind of clash with the bass, because the bass just tends to be E notes. Sometimes it'll go up to an F for that minor second, but only occasionally. So I wanted to make sure the only time the 808 did that is when the standard basses did that as well. Otherwise we can get some clashing. It just doesn't sound too good in our overall mix. So with when it comes to processing on the 808, here, let's see, I think it's on channel 7. 6, I was close. I just did some standard, a little bit of EQing here, and I usually like to put fruity fast distortion on there. Now you can leave it completely clean if you want, but I don't think that gives us enough high frequencies. So you can pick any setting that you want. You can use a completely different distortion plugin. I just like it when I'm not designing my own 808. It just gives me a little more flavor on the bass, which really helps because you still get that low bass that you can feel in your subwoofer, but it also gives you the higher frequencies and harmonics that you can still mess with your EQ. I'll make sure you put your EQ after that, just so in case you get something that you don't really like in there, too much high mid frequencies, you can go ahead and cut that out afterwards if you want. Okay, now let's move on to the bass. So when it comes to the bass, we have 4 different basses here. This is our first one, second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. Now all of these I designed myself. I did use some wavetables that did not come with Serum, but it's really not as much about the wavetables as it is the techniques that you use and the modulation. So let's get right into it. I'm not going to go super in-depth into every single sound, but I do want to show you guys the basic techniques that I used. So for this first sound, what I wanted to take advantage of, it actually started out very different than it is now. I started out with, in the, you can't see this drop down, but if you go to digital, there's a wavetable called I Can Has Kick, which is gives you a very snails bass sound, and I sort of went with that at first, but then once I got into post-processing, it didn't exactly sound how I wanted it, so I switched over, and I just have a basic 1 macro bass here modulating the wavetable position, and I think that's it actually. Yeah, that's all that there is modulating. I have some tube distortion and a multiband compressor. I almost always put my distortion first just to give us the extra harmonics before we bring it up, otherwise it can kind of mess with the overall EQ. And then in post, I distort it even more because I just really wanted to make this bass as heavy as possible. Now when I reset this patch, I had already, I went through and I designed the patch with the I Can Has Kick table, and then I went through and did what I wanted to in post, and it didn't really sound how I wanted to, so I reset the Serum patch to just a saw wave, which sounded like this. And with all this post-processing on it, I really thought that it was basically there. I just needed to add another wavetable and a couple things in the effects section. I was basically done. And now I wanted to take out some of the highs because they were pretty glaring. And I also have an EQ in here, which is quite important. So I've been taking advantage of this more lately. I'll skim through with a peaking filter that's very sharp. And I'll find the frequencies that just sound really harsh. Now, when I'm playing a note, I make sure to play the root note of the key, since that is the note that it'll be playing the most. I go through and I remove those frequencies. So if you hear this, or more, you can hear some of those frequencies that come back in when we take that EQ off. And then I have just a little bit of reverb at the end. And now for our second bass, this one is more of a Reese type bass. I put some chorus before the distortion, which is, in case you didn't know, it's the standard method of forming that Reese sound that you hear a lot in D&B. But I've been trying to take that into other genres lately because I really like that sort of crunchy sound. Now there is a ridiculous amount of distortion on this patch. I go full tube distortion with plenty of chorus before. I also added the phaser with the mix all the way down. I guess I didn't want it there, so I can go ahead and get rid of that. So it starts out with an acid wave table. Now this macro right here is modulating our pulse width modulation, that stands for. And basically it just changes the width of the wave table. So if you've ever, here I'll give you guys a quick example. If you've ever listened to chiptune or old video game music, then you'll be familiar with the pulse width modified square wave. And if you keep doing that, it of course changes your harmonics in there and just really adds a different flavor to the sound. And you can take advantage of that a lot in bass. So I had a pretty heavy pulse width modulation on there with the first macro, and then I also FM'd it with this kind of half saw, half triangle wave. It's quite high up there. And you can hear all those aftertones once I let go of the note in the release, even though there's no release on the envelope, just because of the chorus on there, and then the second layer of distortion with an additional chorus and hyperdimension in there. That just really, it gives an aftertone that a lot of people don't really like, but I really like how it sounds, even because a lot of times it's covered up with the side tuning right afterwards, but it still gives just a flavor that I really like. Now this filter right here is just a low pass filter with the mix halfway down, just because honestly I thought it'd be interesting. Now I went through here and I EQ'd it a little and got rid of some of the harsher frequencies right there. Then I went through again with another layer of distortion and compression. Now that's very overkill. You don't need to do that at all, but I really just wanted to see what would happen. And that's, honestly, that's I think the best thing that you can do when you're producing is just, why not try it out? You can always undo it. And unless you're working in like a really specific situation, you can almost always undo what you just did. So why not give it a try? What can go wrong, right? And then our third bass right here. is basically just a variation of the first bass, or the second bass, sorry, except it only has one wavetable this time. Now I wanted to find a wavetable with a lot of vowel harmonics in it. Now it didn't have a lot at first, but I thought it had potential, so I added a formant filter to it. Just to give it some of those vowely growl harmonics in there. And I added a second formant filter going the other direction with the formant knob changed a little bit, so you get a little bit of those different frequencies. I low passed on the tube distortion, and that's one of the reasons I like the serum distortion so much, is because you can choose what frequencies you want to distort. And now you can do that with other plugins. Like I have in here, I have a patcher preset that I like to use, where I have things split into different bands in case I want to do a parallel processing. But I really like the serum distortion because it's easy to just get a quick, unique distortion. Plus you have so many different types. You can't read this down here because of my capture. But you have like 12, 13 different types of distortion that you can mess with. And you got your 3 types of filter here, as well as the drive and mix. And even though it's a pretty simple distortion effect, it really goes a long way. Now I have a compressor here, some more distortion, and I think 3 layers of distortion, which is insane. It's absolutely ridiculous. As well, I went through with the EQ again. All these basses that you're hearing are going through my basses mixer channel, which just gives them a high cut, just so we don't have that sub bass frequency in there. Everything that goes through the sidechain obviously gets sidechained. Everything that goes through the basses is just going through the sidechain with a high cut. If I'm actually doing a sub bass, that'll go through the sidechain on its own, like this 808. But I want to cut those sub frequencies easily, and I just have that set up in my preset FLP. Now finally, this last one, I wanted to try and get a bit of a metallic hit sound, and I didn't really get what I was going for a ton, but I still think it turned out pretty good. So I went through and I found 2 metallic sounding wavetables that I liked, and I created a pluck envelope with a low pass filter. Again with some distortion, a filter, a reverb filter this time, because that kind of gives it more of the metallic sound. Now I actually have another envelope, which is actually doing the reverse of what I wanted it to. That's what I meant for it to do. I wanted to have the reverb filter take effect right after the initial transient hit, because the reverb kind of messed with the punchiness of the transient, so I figured if I could just reverse that real quick, then that would make it sound a little bit better, and I didn't even realize that I didn't accomplish what I wanted it to. Then we have a compressor, reverb, standard stuff, and I don't even think I EQ'd the sound, which I probably should, but I'm not going to do right now. So those are all of our basses. And when it comes to the pattern, it's really up to you. I tried to make the first bass sound in here, this one right here, my main kind of lead sound. Space pattern, I wanted to make that the most prominent sound. Even if it isn't the loudest or the punchiest, I wanted to make sure that that was the one that kind of stood out. So even when the rest of them are just playing filler notes, I wanted these to sort of play a melody. Not really, even though it's just changing octaves and occasionally going up a half step. I really wanted that to be the prominent sound in there. Okay, so now we'll talk about the modulation of our basses. Now any bass with a macro I automated. Now even though I didn't necessarily use it every time, automate the macro every time the bass sound played, I still wanted it there. So that just gives it a bit of a different tone, because if the note stays flat the whole time, it doesn't exactly give the sound that we want. Now this, there actually used to be a note here, but I just left the automation so in case I wanted to grab it later for a different part. Now these 2 halves right here of pattern 6 are almost identical. I just copy pasted and added a little bit of variation, sometimes with the octave, a little bit with the melody at the end of pattern 6. And so that's everything for our basses. Now we can go ahead and move on to the extra background sounds in here. Now I didn't have a ton of background sounds in here. I really wanted to focus on the sound design and the drums for this demo, but The background sounds that I do have, in the drop at least, are these horns. And you'll hear brass a lot in hybrid trap. I got these also from the Savage drums for trap from Cymatics. It's just an alternating little pattern here with the just a little half step. And it's really more for the background in the drop. It's more prominent in the build, so we can go over that real quick. For our vocals, I just took a Cymatics vocal sample. You can use any vocal sample. You don't even have to have a vocal sample there, but for this demonstration, I wanted something there.
This is my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone.
This is what the vocal sample originally sounded like.
This is my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone.
And since it kind of didn't really cut off at the end, but it had this silence there, I figured just repeating it would sound a little weird with the silence at the end, so I just kind of added a little bit of a stutter there.
This is my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone. This is my cologne and I'm smoking out the zone. This is my cologne and
let's see.
this is my cologne and this is my cologne and this is my cologne and on and on and on and on.
And then I automated the pitch. If you want to see a tutorial on how to do more advanced vocal buildups, I'll have one right at the top of the screen right here. So I automated the pitch to go up right here.
On and on and on and on and on. This is my cologne.
And then I also automated the volume of it.
On and on and on and on and on.
Because we have this riser here. I found this riser. It's just a preset, or not a preset, a sample I didn't make myself. And I think it even goes for a little longer, but I didn't want that excess part. You can grab some white noise. I usually use white noise from my sample pack that I made like 2 years ago, which would be stupid and outdated because of my technical knowledge 2 years ago, but it's white noise, so like can't be too bad. So I usually just grab some of that when I need white noise, and then I grab some build-up drums as well. And it even has this little fill here at the end before the regular fill, but I just left it in there for example purposes. And the horns we have on repeat. Like so. So that's just about everything except for the mastering. So let's go over the mastering real quick. Usually I go through a complicated mastering process. I mean, it's not like some of the super technical mastering engineers, but for now I really just wanted to throw a basic maximizer on there, just so I didn't have to go through a full mastering tutorial and make this video longer than it had to be. If you guys want, sometime I can make a mastering tutorial. Mastering is not exactly my specialty. I'm not very good at it, so I mostly just take from other things that I've seen people do online and just practice it and get somewhat better at it. It's not exactly great, but I just threw a basic maximizer on there, just keep it easy. So that's everything. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what genre you want to see next, anything you want to see at all. I know I've been really inactive lately, but I wanted to get this out there since we're getting kind of close to 500 subscribers. I think we're only like, I don't know, I think we're almost at 400 right now, so I wanted to keep the flow of videos going once we get there. So thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.
What is this, chat? Subscribe to QBM? Okay, well I guess that counts then.